am the director of the Startup Visa program with North Forge Technology Exchange. North Forge acknowledged that it is located on Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral lands of Anishinaabe, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Oyate, Denisolan, and Nihithwek nations, and is the homeland of the Red River Métis. Northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicated ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you all for joining our frequent Startup Visa Program Roundtable, where we host reputable experts in the immigration field to share their useful insights around different aspects on topics. Our agenda for today is we're going to start with an introduction by our President and CEO, Joelle Foster, where she's going to introduce North Forge and a few new announcements about our startup visa program. And then we're going to go with a discussion by Jade. Jade Calver is one expert, immigration expert, who started with North Forge since the beginning of our program, and we are proud to work with her. And then we're going to go to a Q&A. Please, at your right side, you're going to find the Q&A tab. Write your questions in there, and we're going to have like this Q&A session to answer your questions. And then we're going to go back to the networking, where you can contact with Jade one-to-one on her table, or you can contact with North Forge team in our table. So for those who don't know North Forge, we are a business incubator and accelerator located in the heart of Canada, which is Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are one of the SUV designated incubators and the only incubator in Manitoba and Saskatchewan that is part of the Canada Tech Network, where we have a priority for processing our applications. To kick off us today, I would like to welcome North Forge President, CEO, and co-founder Joelle Foster to the stage to provide you with a bit of background about North Forge and the new look of our SUV program. So, Joelle, if you just open your mic and video.
There we go. Good morning. How is everyone? Or I should say good morning here, but good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're from. It is my absolute pleasure to be on this call with all of you and to share who we are. As Nermeen mentioned, North Forge, we are an incubator located in the beautiful city of Winnipeg in Manitoba. We actually have the most lakes per capita in Canada, in our province. So it's 35 minutes and you can reach a sandy beach anywhere. We have the most sunshine. I know that we have a winter, but we have the most winter events for any city in Canada. And it's certainly a dry cold, which means that's a good thing. So I always, Winnipeg gets sometimes the worst rap, but I think that we're in one of the most beautiful cities in Canada. Actually, Globe and Mail just named us as the #1 city in Canada to raise your children, and the 3rd city in Canada as a newcomer to come and raise your families. So as you can see, I'm very proud of where we come from, and I'm very proud of our incubator. I helped co-found it 8 years ago, and our mission is to help startups create innovative businesses, but we also do that under a lens of diversity and inclusion. This is extremely important to us. We actually won 2 awards in the last 3 months for diversity and inclusion. So I want you to know that is a very big focus for us. Wouldn't have been able to win those awards without our amazing Nermeen Saad. I can't say enough incredible things about this woman and running the Startup Visa program. She does everything with her full heart. She gets so involved with the startups. She will know your children and your spouses, and because she cares. You are not a number to us. This is why we've never done more than a dozen startup visa in any given year, because it's not about prestige or making any money. It's about bringing really intelligent and wonderful people to Canada to start their businesses, to raise their families in a wonderful province and country. So I just want you to know that how important that is to us. We're also part of the TECNA network. CTN is wonderful, but TECNA is a North American network. It's the Technology Councils of North America. And that affords us the ability to help our startups get into the US. So we have connections in absolutely every state. I have, through them, I was able to go to Washington a couple of months ago and represent Canada to make sure that we're making changes that are going to help our tech startups here in Canada. So that is another thing that North Forge does is we advocate for startups in Canada, trying to change policies and make sure that we're competing on a global stage so that when you come here that you're heard and that we can help you grow, but that we can also have those connections with the US and with the rest of the world. Nermeen is going to be going into detail about some of the changes. I do want to make sure that all of you understand that you can come to North Forge directly as an incubator, that you do not need to go through any outside organizations. Don't let anyone tell you that they have to work with you in order to get to us. A part of why Canada has changed the startup visa is because of North Forge's advocacy around making sure that it's done properly and legally, and making sure that you are not being taken advantage of by players in the ecosystem that are providing falsehoods around how to work with us incubators. So you can see how serious we are about this. So if you have any questions about that, you can always ask Nermeen. Nermeen will go into detail, but we will be starting to accept applications on September the 23rd. 3 days after my birthday. I'm always reminding Nermeen because she provides cakes and desserts, and that's one of the things that if you come to Winnipeg, that you will always have wonderful food to eat. She will go into a few more details, but I just want you to know that I have an open door policy. Nermeen is always there for you, but I am there for you as well. I am a hands-on CEO and a former entrepreneur. And this means a lot, this program that we're doing. So I just want to thank all of you for being on this call. Nermeen, back to you, my dear. Oh, we can't hear you. There we go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joelle. I just want to add to what Joelle has already said around our program. And we are proud that we have so far 0% rejection for our applications, and we are committed to keep this running. Don't see that we are hard. No, we are committed to you. We want you to be accepted. That's why we have lots of requirements and lots of due diligence, because we think about you. We don't think about anything else. The other thing about Joelle, when she was introducing herself, I just want to say that she's an amazing person to work with, and she's the mother of startups here in Winnipeg, and she's going to be the mother of your startup once you join. So I am really proud to work with her. So thank you very much, Joelle, for being an amazing person.
Thank you.
And let's move forward with this roundtable. I would love to introduce our reputable immigration expert, Jade Calver. So Jade has been an amazing resource for North Forge since we started our program. She was with us since the first beginnings designing the program, and we are very proud working with Jade since the beginning. She has been a very helpful resource and an expert for multiple applicants from our side and others, and I know many of the others out of our network, and she's an amazing person to work with. She's the best to introduce herself, so I'm going to leave the stage for Jade to introduce herself and start her presentation, and then please don't forget, put your question in the Q&A, and I will take care of that. So Jade, it's all for you.
So just before you start, Jade, I'm going to jump off, but I want everyone to know that this incredible woman, since the beginning that we've done the Startup Visa program, we couldn't have done it without her. So I want to thank Jade, and I want everyone to know that she is part of our trusted network and has an incredible heart as well. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've done, and that all of you are in wonderful hands.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So good morning, everyone. As Joelle and Nermeen so nicely put it, my name is Jade Calver. I own and operate Calver Immigration Consulting, Inc. We are a full-service immigration firm located in beautiful Ontario, Canada. I deal mostly with business immigration, including the Startup Visa program. You can find us online on LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me directly. We're also online at calverimmigrationservices.com. So without further ado, so I will share my screen and we will hop right into, I have a short presentation this morning. And so I'll be going through the Startup Visa program and a little bit about what that program looks like. So again, just to start out, we'll talk about what is the Startup Visa program. So it's a program, a business program that it's one of the last left in Canada. So it gives entrepreneurs a direct opportunity for permanent residency and to bring your startup business to Canada. So basic criteria are that you have to show that the business is original. So you have to have an original, unique idea, that you're going to create jobs for Canadians. And then lastly, that it's scalable so that it's going to be able to create jobs and compete on a global scale. And as I said, this is a permanent residency program. It also comes with an optional work permit, which I'll get into in a moment's time, but it does lead directly to permanent residency and comes with an optional work permit. So just to start out, for evaluating your business, or I know we have lots of immigration representatives who are joining. So I'll first talk about, does my business qualify for the Startup Visa program? So first is that it has to be innovative in nature. So you have to show that you are bringing a unique business to Canada. Here, I always tell my SUV clients, yes, you have someone who's working in your best interest for your immigration application, but you should also be speaking with an IP lawyer from the get-go, because Immigration Canada, if you're bringing a startup to Canada, you're going to be mindful about protecting your intellectual property and trademarking your ideas. So be very careful about making sure that you pay attention to the uniqueness of your idea. This is what North Forge is going to look for. And also, how are you protecting it? Next is that you have to be supported by an incubator. So there are designated incubators across the country, including North Forge, which is, of course, one of the best. It is designated as a designated entity. So you have to have a letter of support from a designated entity. So what happens is that you'll pitch to them first you pitch your unique business idea. And then once they do their due diligence, they have their own program where they will review your business plan, review your financials. Nermeen can talk a little bit to that as well. Then if they like these ideas, then they'll issue you a letter of support, which subsequently allows you to apply for the Startup Visa program. Next is that you have to operate your business from within Canada. A lot of you who are bringing businesses to Canada may have successful similar businesses that are operational from outside of Canada. But with the Startup Visa, you have to be headquartered in Canada. So this means that the main executive, the senior management, those who are actually, the even managerial workers will actually be headquartered in Canada. You can't have a business, let's say in India, where most of the work is done there, and then just you as the executive lives here. That's not actually moving your business to Canada. That's just you as the CEO or the CTO. You're just moving you and your family to Canada, and then you're operating an Indian business from Canada. So with the startup visa program, we're very much looking to see that you're going to be headquartered and the bulk of the operations happens from within Canada. So again, as I put here, they want to see that senior management is here and that your research and development is being done here. Manufacturing and things like that, if you have a physical product, that can be done elsewhere. But again, it's the high-level skilled work that has to be done here. Next is regarding business structure. So if you look at the instructions, your business has to be either incorporated at the time of application or at the time that you're granted permanent residency. I tell all applicants, incorporating your business is like the bare minimum. It should be the first thing that you're doing when you're starting your startup visa application. So it's one of the things that you first want to do. I know that there are some provincial restrictions for in Manitoba still for incorporating your business. Sometimes we use other, if you're headed to Manitoba, sometimes we'll use one of the other provinces because they don't, excuse me, require that you be in Canada at the time of incorporation. So something to discuss with your immigration lawyer or consultant when you're putting together the application. And then this is one of the most important parts is that you and the other applicants have to have at least 10% each, and together you have to have majority shares. So you can have up to 5 applicants. You can be a single applicant, but up to 5 business people can be on the startup visa application. And then together you have to hold majority shares of the corporation, and each of you individually have to hold at least 10% of the shares attached to the corporation. Next is the team structure. So as I said, you can have up to 5 founders on the business. And then each of you as a founder, you can actually bring your family on the startup visa application. So your spouse or your common law partner can come with you, as well as your children. Children are considered dependent children up until the age of 21. So under 22. So inclusive of 21, they can come on the application. And if you have older children, those children will get locked in with the application. And so each founder, so it's important to understand, yes, you may have one business, but each founder applies for their own permanent residency application. And if you're applying for the optional work permit, you apply for your own optional work permit. So if there's 5 people in a business, it would be 5 separate applications. One of the big questions we get is, how much money do I need for the startup visa program? So there are 2 requirements. Well, there are 3 requirements when it comes to startup visa, and I'll go through them. So this is one of the biggest misconceptions and things that people struggle with. So first and foremost, we have settlement funds for the permanent residency visa. So if let's say you're a family of 4 people, so yourself, a spouse, and 2 children, you need just over $27,000 Canadian. But settlement funds are just that. This is to help you settle in Canada. $27,000 isn't going to get you very far in Canada these days. The idea is that it's the bare minimum to get you through 6 months of life in Canada. There's also settlement funds if you're applying for the work permit. You'll see that it actually doubles, because the idea is that you're coming here on the work permit for a year. And so they ask for double the amount of settlement funds to show in your work permit application, because you have to show that you have the ability to, because you may not be revenue generating yet, most of you are not with your startup. So they want to see that you have enough money to actually support yourself and your family in Canada while you're here on a work permit. Excuse me. Important things to know. And then why I say there's a third unwritten criteria for funds is that we have settlement funds with the startup visa work permit and PR applications, but we also want to see business funds in an application, and North Forge will look for this with your application. So they want to see, when they look at your business plan and their CPA will review your cash flow projections, they're going to see that you have a certain amount of money that you need as far as startup funds. So I would say on average, it's about $150,000 to $200,000 Canadian. So they're going to want to see, you can't say, oh, I'm just going to move to Canada and raise the funds and then apply for PR. That's not how it works. You have to be self-funding, at least at the beginning. So whether it's the combination of the team members putting in their own personal funds, or maybe you have an investor to provide those startup funds for the actual business. But North Forge, as well as the government eventually, is going to want to see that the business plan that you've put together, that it's reasonable, and it also has to be big enough to constitute a startup. If you only need $5,000 to launch your startup, well, it's probably not big enough to even be eligible for startup visa. So again, we want to see that you have a reasonable and significant amount of funds that you're putting together with an application, and that you, either from a team member or your investor or your maybe foreign business, you have the money to put into the Canadian business. Great. A few other important things to know. So each founder has to take an approved English or French exam. Intermediate levels are needed. So for those of you who know language levels, it's Canadian Language Benchmark Level 5. But keep in mind, CLB levels don't correspond to the exact number that you need in the IELTS or the CELPIP. For French, it's the TEF or the TCF if you're French language speaking. IRCC will check for regular admissibility issues. So they'll ask about criminality issues, health issues, previous immigration applications. And with startup visa, proof of progress, and I always sound like a broken record, I'm sure I'll say this a few times throughout the presentation, but proof of progress is the most important thing in these applications. So what happens is that you'll submit an application to the government. Eventually, usually after about 1 year, you'll get what's called an AOR, which is an acknowledgement of receipt with a file number. And then eventually, during processing, the government will ask for these inadmissibility checks. So your updated police certificates, a medical exam, and then also they'll ask for documents pertaining to the actual Canadian business, which I'll get into. But effectively, what they're looking for is, are you progressing in the business? And so the check is always, do I think that this person genuinely wants to start this startup in Canada? Or do I think that they just went through the process to try to get permanent residency and that they're just doing the bare minimum so that they can get PR? So what are the benefits of the SUV program? So it's a direct permanent residency application. So at the end of the process, you'll become a Canadian permanent resident. It also comes with an optional work permit for you to come earlier to Canada to start working on your business. And Canadian permanent residency is really great in that it's a direct pathway to Canadian citizenship, which can be beneficial, especially to you as business people, because it removes the requirement for visas. How long does processing take? So processing is not quick. It's 39 months. However, and I believe, Nermeen, you guys are priority processed, if I'm not mistaken, for an application. So 39 months, but the benefit of going through North Forge as an incubator is that they're priority processed applications because they're part of the special network that allows them to qualify for such processing. And then processing times for a work permit, it's all dependent on which country you're applying from. So someone applying from Hong Kong versus, Singapore versus Brazil, it's all going to be different processing times because each of those countries is supported by a different visa office. So if you go online and look at the work permit processing from Immigration Canada for those countries, it will show you the different processing time for the time that you submit your application. I wanted to talk about the recent changes to the startup visa program. So this year we had some major changes to the SUV program. So they really were just reinforcing, they came out with these requirements, but to me, these requirements always existed. They're just a little bit more upfront about them these days instead of it being a smoke and mirrors process. So one of the first things is job creation. So they're going to want to see, are you creating high quality jobs for Canadians? It's not, are you creating labor positions? It's, are you hiring software engineers, AI designers, senior marketing people? They want to see that you're creating high paid, high quality jobs in Canada. So when we take a look at your business plan and I see your cash flow projections, I want to see that job creation is actually happening. And then during processing, because as you can see, it can take up to 3 years plus for processing, the government more or less expects that especially if you're a small team, that you are moving towards actually creating those jobs in Canada. Next is product or service innovation. So as I said at the start of the presentation, you want to make sure that it's innovative. When I'm reviewing a client's application and business plan for qualifying under the startup visa program, sometimes they're not innovative enough. For example, I had a client who they were, they actually had walls, like green walls that they were installing, but the government was focused on the technology, so on the actual like applications that they were creating, and then the actual hardware that they had, because they don't actually care, because without the innovation and the ability to scale, if you're just a business that's installing some sort of green wall installation, then you're not innovative, because lots of people do that, right? So think about it when you're presenting your business. It has to be unique, and there has to be technology that you're able to protect through the actual IP process. So you have to think about that when you're putting together your business plan. And then next is they've also included in the instructions that they want to see training opportunities for Canadians. So what I like to include in business plans and progress reports, and I also prompt my clients to do, is make sure that you are offering co-op placements for Canadian university and college students. This can be really helpful, and we have wonderful colleges and universities in Canada who are often chock full with students who are willing to learn. So think about the opportunities that you can afford to Canadians and permanent residents, and put that in your business plan and incorporate that as part of your business strategy. You also often get these very wonderful, talented students who will work at a lower price, or sometimes for not very much or no money if it's part of their co-op, because it's part of their schooling. And then in the application, so up front with your work permit, it can be included later with your permanent residency application, but we want to see documents showing that you're an experienced entrepreneur. So that's very vague. So when you're actually talking about tangible documents, so I like to include evidence of all businesses and work history that someone has had for at least the last 10 years. So work experience letters, your business documents, so incorporation documents, business taxes, letters of support from clients and suppliers, and then also your training. So this is both formal, university or college education, but have you done any additional industry specific training? And then what about, have you done speaking? Have you presented at conferences? Have you won special awards? It's really, this is your opportunity to shine. You have to put your best foot forward to show how amazing you are. Like, the idea behind Startup Visa is that you are a tech and innovation superstar. And so you have to present yourself as one, because they want to see, wow, this person is so amazing and they're so experienced that Canada has to have them. And then here, so they've said how your business will provide at least one of the benefits above. Again, this is relating to the work permit. So again, I include all of them in my work permit applications. We check all of the boxes when it comes to the work permit applications for my clients, but they look at this too when it comes to the actual permanent residency visa review. So think about this and incorporate it. And what I do is I incorporate this in the business plan for my clients, and I make sure that, they do it, they write it, but I make sure that they're actually touching on these benefits, because this is what the officers want to see during their review of the application. Another recent change is that there's now a cap on how many applications will be accepted annually. So the government has said to the incubators, you can now only pick 10 businesses per calendar year. And they, again, priority processing is given to entrepreneurs whose startup is supported by members of the Canada's Tech Network. So that includes North Forge. So if you guys are shopping around for incubators, think about and look at who's part of those networks. And also, I've worked with many startup visa applicants over the years and many incubators. And you, especially if you're, a superstar entrepreneur and you have a really unique business, shop around a little bit for incubators. North Forge, for example, they're an example of an incubator that's doing it right. So take a look at the support that they provide, not only during the intake stage, but also you're paying them to be your business incubator. So think about the support that they're providing to you, after you get the letter of support and you're working on your business for the next 3 years, because you want to make sure that you're actually getting a service for the fees that you're paying. And so, this is just my advice on when picking an incubator. You want to make sure that the services are there when you're actually paying money to the incubators. A question that I get often is about optimal application timing. So you'll get a letter of support from the incubator when they approve you, which is valid for 6 months. All applicants, you have to apply for permanent residency within the expiration period. And then for the work permits for any of the applicants, they have to be filed after everyone from the entire team has filed for permanent residency. So just be mindful of that, because if you have one of your team members that's really delaying with their PR application and you're wanting a work permit, you may not meet the deadline. So just be mindful of that. And then the work permits also have to be filed whilst the letter of support is still valid. If you have to get it reissued, often the incubator will ask about why you took so long. You had 6 months to submit an application. So bear in mind that you do want to meet those deadlines once you get the letter of support. A couple of things. Unfortunately, the startup visa program has had some bad actors, as Joelle said earlier, hence the recent changes to the program. Here I've put, be very careful when working with third-party business consultants. So I don't mean immigration consultants or lawyers. I mean, there are businesses out there that they tout themselves as business consultants or accelerator assistants, and I get emails from them all the time. And effectively what they do, often they'll sell you an idea, or they'll say, we'll take your idea and commercialize it and write you the business plan and help you through the process. My experience is that IRCC really does not like this. If you do choose to work with them, and this is not to disparage all third-party consultants, like the business consultants, because some of them are really needed and they can have these wonderful connections in Canada and they can really help you in your industry. But others, sometimes they charge excessive amounts of money and then they're not actually helping you in the overall process, because you still have to do the work on the business. So just be careful with that. And then of course, make sure that your representative is regulated in Canada. So you need to use either a regulated Canadian immigration consultant or a Canadian immigration lawyer who is licensed with one of the provinces. If you're using a foreign lawyer, they're not regulated in Canada, and they also likely don't know startup visa or Immigration Canada's rules very well. So just keep in mind that, make sure that your representative is regulated in Canada. And then I put a note here just because sometimes clients, they don't know what they don't know, and I'm really big on avoiding misrepresentation. So misrepresentation is when you omit or fail to declare information or lie on an application. So as an applicant, all past business experience has to be declared. And then if you have any past immigration refusals to any other country, that doesn't preclude you necessarily from the startup visa application, but you do have to declare them in your application. So just be careful with that, because that can really result in some issues and potential refusals for you and the rest of your team when it comes to the startup visa application. So how do I guarantee success in startup visa? Well, I can't tell you this, but there are things that we do for our clients and that I see my clients do that can really help you with success. So first is that proof of progress in the business venture. I told you I would sound like a broken record, but the more you worry about moving your business forward and the less you worry, I have some clients who email me monthly asking for an update on their immigration application. But really, if they put that energy into the business and moving the business venture forward, I think that they would have a much greater chance of success, because Immigration Canada is going to come to you eventually and say, give us an updated progress report. And so they're looking, are you Have you launched? Is your prototype ready? Do you have any revenue? Do you have any clients? Have you done any trial runs? So they want to see, are you actually, as a team, moving the business forward? My most successful clients in Startup Visa, they have contracts already, quite frankly. By the time the government is reviewing their application, their business is so far ahead that they have revenue, they're generating revenue for the Canadian business already. Next is make sure that you're a genuine team formed for the purpose of business. So don't include all of your brothers on the application because they want PR as well. Don't include a random person because they're going to give you $1 million for the business and they don't actually want to do the work. So make sure that all of you are actually active business participants, and that you'll all be actively working in the business. At minimum, we want to see an MVP. So we want to see that proven concept of your business. As I said earlier, being in IP discussions with a lawyer, making sure that you're trademarking your products if you can, making sure that you're working to protect your ideas if it's possible. I realize not everybody can do that, but it does often show that, especially if you've spent the money on going through that process, it does show the officer that you're serious about your idea. Next is a genuine integration into the Canadian business ecosystem. So someone can have a really great idea, but if they are not, if they're not actively working with, your incubator, for example, North Forge is this wonderful resource who's there to help you, and they can introduce you to people you're wanting to meet, to connect with, and establishing that network. And so you don't have to be the most successful with Startup Visa. We want you to be, of course, but Immigration Canada will also reward you for trying. So I would rather have someone who had 40 meetings this past month and it didn't result in a client, as opposed to maybe just one meeting, which resulted in like a tiny little contract, because we want to see that you're actively working day to day on this business. So integrating yourself into the Canadian business ecosystem, participating in industry events, connecting with industry, experts is going to really help your application. And then lastly, surrounding yourself with a good team in Canada. To me, every successful Startup Visa applicant has a really great immigration consultant or lawyer who has experience with Startup Visa. If you're interviewing your immigration lawyer or consultant, ask them about how many SUV applications they've done. It's fine if they're new, but maybe they want to consider co-counseling with another representative. If they're brand new to SUV applications, maybe interview another couple of lawyers or consultants. I think that you should have a really good accountant on your team. I think that you should have, not on your business, not on your actual founders, but I think you should have a Canadian accountant that you connect with early on in the process. I think that you should have a great IP lawyer that can help you through any IP issues. And again, as I said, North Forge has these experts and these connections, so you don't necessarily need to go looking for them yourself. They will have these people to refer you to. So keep in mind that you want to build up this team so that early on in the process, so that when issues crop up or you need support, you have these professionals in your corner so that you can rely on their support to make your application strong, and your business. If you encounter any business issues, you want to be able to rely on them. Great. So at the end of the process, you then become a Canadian permanent resident. You maintain your passport from your home country, and then permanent residence is permanent, as I said. The only restriction is that out of every 5 years, you have to be physically present in Canada. And then as long as you meet those requirements, you can renew this card every 5 years. And then if you'd like, you can then apply for Canadian citizenship. We have a fairly simple and straightforward pathway to citizenship in Canada. So after 3 years of physical presence in Canada as a permanent resident, we can also, if you come on a work permit before your PR, we can also count some of those days as well. You then apply for citizenship, which takes about 1 year to process. And that, of course, gives you a Canadian passport, which, ease of travel, no residency requirements, and then also access to certain markets in particular, the US and Europe as a business person is often where you're trying to go with your startup. So often we try to get our SUV applicants to citizenship as quickly as possible after they have PR. So that is everything I have for today. So thank you so much for joining. Again, my name is Jade Calver. I'm an RCIC. I founded my practice, Calver Immigration Consulting, 12 years ago. We're located in Ontario, and we help clients and businesses from all over the world relocate to Canada. If you'd like to connect with me again, LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. You will message me directly on there. I respond to I try to respond to all messages there. And then again, you can always get in touch with me. Here's my email and phone number. Thanks so much. And we will open the floor to questions. And I'm here for as long as you'd like to answer questions about the SUV process.
Thank you very much, Jade, for this amazing informative presentation. I think that you have covered everything that I wanted to say, but you just like take it over my plate. So thank you very much. It's amazing things, especially when you were talking about the teams and multiple questions in here and multiple, let's say, problematic issues that we have faced when it comes to team. And I want to start with those questions, Jade, which is related to first. I want you to give like some insights around these fake matched team and these fake matched team with business. You already touched base on those consultants that you were talking about. But I would like to highlight this.
Sure. So what happens is that someone may contact you because you're on LinkedIn as a business person, or you contact them because you have seen their ads, and they'll say, immigrate to Canada, you only need, you need $100,000 and we'll do everything for you. And then you'll get PR in 3 years. And so what they're doing is that they're finding 5 other people similar to this, and they're going to match you up, create the business plan, and essentially create the startup visa team. So, well, technically, there's nothing that prohibits you from doing so. The issue is that it doesn't go very well for anybody during the process. I haven't had my clients do it, but I co-counsel, so I teach a lot of immigration consultants and lawyers about how to navigate the startup visa program. And their clients, they've already gone through one of these, business consultants, accelerator businesses. And what happens is that these businesses, they're just not going to work on your business as well as an actual entrepreneur would. And so what happens is that after 1.5 years, 2 years, Immigration Canada comes and says, tell us about how your business was formed. Tell us about who generated the idea. Tell us about who wrote the initial business plan. Tell us about the progress. And so if you're relying on some random business and a team of people to move your business forward that you're then supposed to work on in Canada, as you can maybe guess, it's not going to go well because they just don't do much on the business. And so those applications, unfortunately, that's where I've seen some refusals with startup visa, because they say, well, sometimes it can be at the very worst, they can say your team wasn't formed for genuine business purposes, and then you run into misrepresentation issues. Or what usually happens is that they say, there's no progress in the business, like we don't think that it's a genuine business, and then they just refuse this SUV application. So it doesn't go well for people. So again, if you're hiring or engaging someone to help you with business activities in Canada, and that can be helpful. Like there are people who are really wonderful out there. And if you need recommendations, I'm happy to introduce you to them. But they'll charge a fee that is reasonable. It's nothing. They'll also expect you to do the work. They're not going to say, I will do the business. They're not going to say, I'm going to make everything happen for you. They'll say, write me a business plan and I'll give you some pointers. Or they'll say, let's meet periodically and we'll help you through the process, but they're not doing the process for you, and they're not going to be charging exorbitant amounts of money. It's going to be a reasonable fee, and they're going to expect you to still do the work. So if anything with startup visa sounds too good to be true, don't do it, because you're just going to end up, having invested a lot of money, losing a lot of money, and then ending up with an immigration refusal on your record as well.
Well said. Thank you very much for this answer. Really well said. So let's go through the question. We have lots of questions, so I will start to have like a variety. Yeah. So the first one says that, do the revenues of running businesses considered as a proof of funds or at least a guarantee for financially supporting the business? And there is also concerns around the tax claims. I'm running my business outside Canada and now I'm going to tell the government that I have this revenue coming from this business. So it's two-sided question. Can I claim this as a business proof of fund? And what is my tax situation?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to proof of funds for startup visa, so again, two separate things. So for the settlement funds, so that's for both remember our family of four needed about 27,000 and then about 52,000 for the work permit. That has to be cash in the bank, so available funds that are liquid. So it means you can withdraw it from the bank tomorrow. So if it's in your personal account or if it's your business account with your name on it, fine, we can use that. And then if it is for supporting the business, so often what people do is they'll use their personal funds to show settlement funds, and then to show that they, as a person, have additional funds to support the business, they will show, if they have business bank accounts, which often have more money in it than personal accounts, then you can use those, but you just need to show that you have access to it. Because if it's you and four other founders that own a business, then you can't use that because it's not all of your money, right? So you would just have to be careful to show in the business account that you are the 100% owner of that business, to show that all of that money is yours. And then tax implications. That's a complicated question and a CPA can probably answer it better. But if you're asking about tax implications, I mean, after you live in Canada for 6 months, then you become a resident for tax purposes, regardless of your immigration status. And then if you're declaring worldwide income, it could make it so that you have to claim it on your Canadian tax returns, but probably a question better for your CPA.
Yes, you're right. I will make sure to have this answer and then going to send it with the other package of this session for everyone. The other
Great.
one is one of the co-founders. So this is a case. So one of the co-founders has a high chance of being medically inadmissible because genetic medical condition. How to prepare for a medical exam to make the chances of being medically inadmissible lower? Is there anything that can be done in here?
Sure. So if we had an applicant who may be medically inadmissible, so the rule in your letter of support, your incubator will ask who is essential and who is non-essential. And the rules say that everyone who's essential in an application, all of the essential persons have to be accepted in order for the rest of the team to be accepted. So to be proactive, if we already know that there's a potential medical inadmissibility there, I would probably be telling that person that they need to be listed as non-essential, because if we ever get to the end and IRCC says this person it doesn't qualify, we're going to refuse them based on medical inadmissibility, then you would remove them from the startup visa application and the rest of the team would still be approved. And then medical inadmissibility. So if you know that is a concern, what I would be doing proactively is that there are immigration lawyers and consultants, I have referrals if you need them, who specialize in medical inadmissibility issues. It's quite a complicated issue. But the long and short of it is that you get second opinions from doctors to show what the cost of managing that health issue in Canada would be. And so you try to make the argument that despite this person having this medical issue, that they're not going to be a burden on the Canadian healthcare system. So I would be proactively managing and addressing that issue before I even applied for permanent residency for the person. And then you maybe want to figure it out if it's like a 100%, if the medical inadmissibility specialist says, 100% they're going to be refused, then then my advice would probably be don't include them on the application.
Interesting. So the other question related to another case, he says that, or she says, I was denied a US visa after I applied for the Canadian PR. Do I need to notify IRCC that I was denied for this US visa if they don't send a request to update the IMM 5669 form?
Yeah, so she kind of answered her own question. So no, you don't have to it's not something like a US refusal that you get after you've filed your application. You don't have to proactively email them and let them know. But likely, whoever this person is, everybody gets a new 5669 request. So that's your Schedule A background information form. So in that form, they ask about any previous refusals. And this goes for everybody who's applying. They'll always ask about previous immigration refusals. So you would just put it there. But as long as, as long as that refusal doesn't bring up something new, like a criminality issue or something, then just like a refusal because they don't think you're going to leave, it's not going to affect your PR application.
Interesting. So the other question says, which form do we need to use to send the quarterly updates to IRCC? So I'm wondering if they ask about their business quarterly. I believe, Jade, we collect them because I collect them quarterly. And
Yeah.
then once the IRCC come, because the IRCC come to the incubator directly asking about the specific case.
Yeah.
But if they are asking about their application, it is something else. So maybe you have to just like,
Sure.
it is a two-sided question.
Yeah, so there's no requirement to send in progress reports to the government. However, a couple of things. So for the work permit application, I find that, let's say like the visa office takes 8 months to review an application. So what I like to do, especially because with the work permit application, they're so particular about what's already being done on the Canadian business, which is a tricky task to do, in my opinion, because you're just starting your business and they want to see already what you've done. So I take advantage of those long processing times, and I will actually send in via web form your most recent progress report, because then you're showing the visa officer with evidence what you've done while you're waiting to hear back on the work permit application. And then same thing with the permanent residency application. I don't send them in always, but once we get a little bit closer to when we know we're going to start getting updates, I had a couple of clients who they had just made such great progress. Like he was accepted to a second prestigious incubator in Toronto. He was presenting, he had amazing results in like the year. And so I proactively sent that progress report with evidence to our IRCC, and they actually didn't ask me for any new updates on the business. Like it was just forms and then he was approved. So it's anecdotal, I admit. It doesn't necessarily mean it will help everybody, but I find that if there's something important to report, then I find that it helps to be proactive and send it in. And it's via web form to answer your question. So there's an online form that you fill out with your information, including your application number, and then you can attach documents as a PDF and send it in.
Interesting. So Jade, after this session, whenever you have time, I would love you to, I know that I can't find the form, but you are the expert here because I was asked
Okay.
about this web form. There is
Sure.
lots of web forms. So if you can send me this link, so I can send it again in the email that I'm going to send after this session. So everyone
And then,
knows what is the, yeah.
yeah, my only note on that is that for the first year, you approximately won't have a file number for the PR application. So if you send in a progress report, then they won't have an application to attach it to. So I would say don't send anything in until you get a file number, because it's just going to go nowhere.
Interesting. Okay, the other question is, if a startup is in development phase, the idea is finalized and that idea implementation is in the process. In this case, is that startup eligible for this program? We're talking
Well,
about the idea stage.
yeah, well, Nermeen, maybe you want to speak to that a little bit. I think that every incubator will be different, but North Forge, I'm sure, has its, well, as I know, you guys have your own criteria when it comes to what you'll accept.
Yeah. So maybe let's not specialize it to North Forge in general. If
Sure.
I have only an idea and I'm applying not necessarily to North Forge, what is your insight as an expert? What is the percentage acceptance rate for an idea that is only a paper thing, or it is an MVP and running businesses?
Yeah, unless, so my answer for the most part is no. I have a caveat that, let's say if somebody's coming to Canada, let's say if you already have a similar business outside of Canada, and then you have this idea where you're maybe just like tweaking the business. So like technically it doesn't exist, but even then I would say it's well past the idea stage because it's been, it's been tested in a foreign market. So like true idea stages, like you're just coming with something brand new and you have no proof of having worked on it in your home country. I just think that unless you can pull off a miracle and really make something happen, like usually I think the answer would be no, just because when it comes to Immigration Canada's review of the actual business, they're going to want to see what's the proof of concept, what progress have you made. It's just going to be, I mean, I'm sure the right entrepreneur could make it happen, but IRCC, you're going to have a really hard time getting it past IRCC, in my opinion.
The other question is, I can have two travel passports simulate in my country. Do I need to report that I got the second travel passport? So do they have to? I think that the government knows, but yeah, it's your answer.
Is this pertaining to dual citizenship?
Yes, there's some countries like my country, for example, we are allowed for three passports. Do I have to declare that I have these? I believe governments know that, but it's your
Yes,
answer.
when you apply for citizenship, they'll ask you which citizenships you have. So Canada will know about your other citizenship. So yeah, when you're applying for Canadian citizenship, you have to be careful because some countries, notably Singapore, Germany, there are a few others, China, like they don't allow for dual citizenship. So then some people, that's why some people just they stay a permanent resident forever. Others decide to, renounce their foreign citizenship because they said, I'm done with that country, I'm moving here. So it really depends on where you're coming from and what you want to do essentially as an individual.
Interesting. But Jade, I believe governments know that. So I was traveling one day with my friend, and she didn't want to, for her own reason, she did not want to declare for the front line. And once the officer up and he said, "Oh, so you have and this passport," so
Yeah.
they know the
Yeah,
governments are working
and it's
together.
not all countries will information share, but many do, especially when it comes to citizenship. So we all have electronic passports. So yeah, there's a lot of information sharing that goes on, which, increasingly so. So it's, more and more difficult to like hide citizenship. So in general, with immigration, don't hide information because it's not going to work out well for you. So yeah, you're going to have to declare it anyway.
So the other question is, they say you mentioned that we need to register a company before getting a PR. Do
Sure.
we need to register and wait for a request for info about it, or we need to send them an update once the company is registered? Again, it's about updating our system.
So again, the rules say that it can either be at the time of application or at the time that PR is being granted. But if you're going to try, the issue is that if you wait until PR is going to be granted, you're just going to be so far behind because you're not going to have a Canadian company. So then you don't have a Canadian business number and no Canadian bank account. And so then if you're trying to like be operational or even represent your Canadian company globally, you're just not going to have a Canadian company. So it's one of those things. Again, it's one of the first things that I have my clients do when it comes to the PR application. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. It's one of those first items that we like to see because it just makes everything else go more smoothly, including the work permit application. So it's one of those things to do sooner rather than later.
Interesting. So the other one is, do delays with the processing of the application of one of the non-essential co-founders affect the processing of essential co-founders?
Yeah, so if one of you are late because you don't have documents, or if you are delaying sending in responses, they're not going to approve everybody until everyone in the team is ready to be approved. So if you have one of your team members who's being late, or this often happens with security reviews. I had a team from Iran that were just approved. 4 team members, 3 were female, 1 was male. I find that with certain countries, especially where there's mandatory military service, it takes a really long time for the background checks to go through. So they were delayed ultimately because of his background checks by at least a year. We can file, well, if you work with an immigration lawyer, they can file for what's called a mandamus application if there are delays that are the government's fault and not your, if it's you providing late documents, that's your problem. If you have delays by the government where you've submitted everything and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, you can file, well, you can threaten and then file for what's called a mandamus application, which generally that's where the court goes back to the government, to the immigration department, and they say you need to finalize this application because it does represent an unfair delay. So that's all about delays. So if it's a result of your team members, then it's going to delay everybody. But if it's the government just taking a long time, then you can use the court to your advantage.
Interesting. We were in another roundtable, and a similar question related to the team. And the answer of that immigration lawyer was, think of your team as your spouse. You are selecting your spouse.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I would love, because I always discuss this with the applicants when they come, but when it comes from an expert like you, I would love to keep insisting on that. Please just give one insight around how to select your team, because this is very essential for your acceptance.
Yeah, they're going to, I've used that line before, like once you have an SUV team, like you're married to one another for quite a long time. So you need to work together, respond together, make sure. And I always say, appoint someone from the team. It doesn't have to be the CEO, who's going to be the coordinator for immigration requests. Because, if I'm your representative and I'm working with, I can't work with each individual team member on a progress report. Like there needs to be one person that I'm working with, because everyone needs to say the same thing in their applications. We can't have 4 separate progress reports. So having someone appointed from the team that's going to navigate immigration matters and keep everybody on track is also really helpful.
So the other question is, have you seen any recent cases approved without registered IP patents in Canada?
Yes. So some of my businesses, they get speak to an IP lawyer and there's nothing to register, like per se. Some of them have a fairly, like a unique enough idea that I don't think it's at like risk of being copied per se. So yes, but others, like it's more, sometimes the government doesn't ask, but often they do. And then if they come to you and you haven't done anything and there's been no plan to protect your idea, I can tell you, not my own files because they've all protected their IP because I told them to, but I worked with another incubator that saw a few refusals because they didn't have any plan regarding their intellectual property protection. So refusals can happen on those points. So it's something, and it's one of those things that, so when someone asks me that, then I would question, why don't you want to protect your intellectual property is my concern. Because if I have a tech startup that's amazing and has this amazing idea, and then someone can just copy it tomorrow and then I'm out of business, then that's a big risk, right? So it's kind of like asking, what if I don't do taxes? Or like, what if it's one of those things that you just are going to want to do if you have a legitimate tech startup.
Yes. But it's a sign of how serious you for your business, right? Serious people, you need to protect whatever you have. Yeah. So the other one is, does any business in the incubator stream that has own investment of 75,000 Canadian dollars qualify for a priority processing as per the current rule? Okay, so I have been asked this question multiple times. So according to the new process, the new regulation, they said that the priority is going to be so VCs, angel investors, CTN incubators, and incubators that provide investment 75K.
Yeah.
And the question was, can I go to any incubator? And the answer, of course, you're going to confirm, but the answer has to be a designated incubator that could provide you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. So the other question is, there is rumor that, oh, okay. So it's up to you to answer this or not. So they say that there is a rumor that the VCs and the angel investors, the applicants, they use the money of the applicants, the fees, as part of the investment. So basically, they don't invest. They just like ask you for that amount of money, and then you apply, they accept you, they take it, and they consider it as an investment. Is that fraud and not real investment?
So well, I've had a couple of clients who came to me who had bad experiences, unfortunately, with some VCs. I think like overall, you have to be very careful with who you're working with for startup visa because you're also married to the designated entity that you're working with. Pick someone like North Forge. You can go online. I'm not going to disparage anybody, of course, but like go online, read the reviews. I'm sure everybody their online forums, Facebook, Reddit, etc. That we'll talk about. Find people that have really good experiences with that VC or that incubator. Don't work with, if there's a bunch of bad reviews online, don't work with them. And so I think it's one of those things. It's a free market when it comes to who you pick as an incubator. Like, of course, they have to accept you, but you need to agree to work with them. And so just be cautious. Same thing when you're choosing any service provider. Make sure that they have a good reputation, because unfortunately, not many, but there are some that do things that I don't necessarily agree with. So yeah, it does happen from time to time.
Yes. And I agree with you, Jade, in terms of that we don't have to, give the credits for one incubator over the others. We all work into one goal, which is growing the Canadian economy and making like a successful startup program. And this
Yep.
is the amazing thing about our relationship with Jade. She never says about North Forge, and we never say about Jade, but we both know that she's an amazing person. She knows. So yeah, so we respect everyone, but yeah, you have to be careful. We have multiple people who came back with like bad practices, with bad experience, so you have to be careful.
Yep.
So the other one is there is rumor that yeah, we've done this
Lots
one.
of rumors.
Yeah, really move it. The other one is what's now the typical timeline after receiving the AOR and
Yeah.
biometric request?
Biometrics request in particular?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, so I'm assuming they're asking this because biometrics can come. So the thing is with processing times, I think a better answer to this is that technically within the processing times, which are now 39 months, technically requests can come anytime during those 39 months, and then they're not actually considered late. Where we've had success with mandamus applications when we're pushing the government to make a decision is when the clients have done everything. So like medicals, biometrics, progress reports, forms, and then they're still waiting for another 6 months. That's when we can start pressing the government. But from AOR to biometrics can be, I don't know, any time within the 39 months. Like there's not necessarily a set amount of time where those things come in. But it's interesting to see. So again, the changes are new when it comes to priority processing. So I think that, yes, it's 39 months for a standard PR application under the Startup Visa program, but North Forge is designated for priority processing. So, if you apply through an incubator that is allowed priority processing, I would expect that would all happen more quickly for you. And then I've seen some clients who get processed very quickly. It's like, a year and a half from application until PR, and others, well, I have a 4-year-old who started kindergarten today, and I have a client that was just approved last week, and we started the application before my child was born. So startup visa, they took the whole 39 months because it took a long time to process. So most applications, I would say on average, I experience about 2 years start to finish for PR, but there are some outliers that do take like the full 39 months. So it really can vary.
So it varies, Jade, in regards to which country they apply, or it varies because of their citizenship, or it varies because
Yeah, there's a really good, there's this wonderful immigration lawyer named Steve Murrins, and he has this podcast, and he was speaking about background checks and being from certain countries, notably Iran or China, especially if you have done military service, worked for the government, if your parents worked for the government, or if you have studied in certain certain areas of study like engineering, math, etc. And so what happens is that they are worried about espionage, essentially. And so the background checks can go on for years and years. So that's often what holds these applications up. So people accuse Startup Visa of taking forever, but I think that a lot of our really talented entrepreneurs are coming from countries or have studied specific things. And so then the background checks take a long time. So we can blame the Startup Visa program for delays, but I also think that it was just a matter of fact that the background checks on these applicants were taking quite a long time.
Yeah. So the other question is, if Jade, do you want to rest a little bit? I'm sorry.
No,
We
go
have
ahead.
a
Fine.
list.
No, I'm
We have
fine. I'm still ready to go.
Yeah, so we have a list, a really long list of questions. So the other one is, if my startup is newly incorporated outside Canada, in Europe specifically, am I eligible for the program? Does this disqualify?
So having a registered business outside of Canada can be a good, can show the government that you're serious about the business, but ultimately you still have to incorporate a business in Canada. So it can be helpful to show some past business experience, but you'll have to have a Canadian business registered at some point.
Interesting. So the other question is, can you please provide tips and advice for applicants who are applying from Canadian sanctioned country? You have already said. So in terms of specifically, Jade, because this is what I have faced with the multiple applicants in terms of transferring the money for either to support their business or to pay the fees or this. So basically, most of them, they use third party, and this third party sometimes in Canada, sometimes and with this, the money transfer does not show that your name as an applicant is in this. So how they can work? They have their own reason that they can't do it from their own country, but how do you deal with that?
Sure. So for the settlement funds and business funds, it's going to have to be in a bank account somewhere because it has to be liquid funds. If you're worried, some people say, a lot of my Iranian clients, for example, they keep their money out of their accounts because they're worried about what the banks are going to do to the value of the currency. I mean, my suggestions for that, obviously consult with a lawyer if needed, but often my clients have money in US dollars, either in the UAE or in Europe, to make sure that their currency doesn't fluctuate too much. And then ultimately, because what happens is that when you present bank statements as well, the officer will go through it and they'll say for the last 6 months, if there are any deposits or withdrawals of $3,000 Canadian or more, tell us what it's from and where it came from. So as you can imagine, if you're transferring cash in and out all the time, that can be a bit of, and there's no like trace of it, it's because it's cash and you don't know where it's going. That can actually become even more of a difficult task. And so I've had clients from Iran who had, transactions, bi-weekly of $3,000, and we had to try to show where it was going to. So just be careful. Again, my Iranian clients, well, if they come to Canada, they try to bring a lot of their cash to Canada, or others will try to keep a bank account, either in euros or maybe in US dollars in the UAE, because they're trying to keep that cash a little bit more stable for the application.
So the other question is, I have a business in the US as a US UK dual citizen that I have been running since 2014. Would it be possible or better to move the business to Canada under the CUSMA, QUSMA, instead of seeking an SUV? So they're asking about which immigration stream do they have to come?
Yeah, so to answer your question, possibly, especially if you're a US citizen and you have an existing business. As you can see from our discussion, startup visa can take a long time. However, it is a direct permanent residency application, whereas a CUSMA work permit is just a temporary work permit, and then you'd have to figure out a way to get permanent residency. So we can chat again if you'd like. You can always send me an email and we can discuss. So depends how old you are, level of education, what your business is. So sometimes yes, sometimes no would be my answer to that.
The other question is, do I need to start a business in Canada while still in my country, and only after generating revenue can I apply for a startup visa program? Okay, so it's another case. I don't think it's an immigration, but yes, the answer is yes. And now North Forge, and I believe most of designated organization, we are not accepting the idea stage, but we are inviting them to apply for next year when they have more, mature business, mature product, maybe potential customer. So now it's not only North Forge, most of us, because of the cap of the 10. So we would prefer to bring a really, let's say, established company, established businesses, rather than on the idea stage, which we respect. And we invite everyone with amazing ideas to keep applying whenever they are ready to do that. The other one is, what if the business fails? What are the measures of failure? How will the failure affect the application process if it happened before getting the PR, after getting the PR, which is a valid question. All businesses are subject to fail, but how this will affect
Yeah.
our application?
So, I mean, failure, yes. I mean, everyone in their business plan will have some sort of like contingency plan if it really, everything, it goes down the tubes and it's not working well. So if you're still in the active application status, my advice is don't let it fail. I mean, you can pivot. I've had clients who, they had an example, they had an AI app in business. And at first they were targeting professionals in general. And then they found a really niche clientele within dentists in Canada. And so they also had like a technology that was to be used like for dentists in their dental office. So they pivoted a little bit from the initial plan. So my first recommendation is that if you're not approved yet, pivot. So, and work with your incubator to, have their support through this, because you want to make sure if you're changing the, what your business is doing, you have to have the support for the incubator, because they're going to want to make sure it's still innovative and scalable. And then if you get permanent residency and your your business fails, there aren't any repercussions per se. But my advice is, and we haven't seen this yet because we haven't seen any audits or follow-up, but if you get permanent residency and then the next day you dissolve your corporation and you stop all work, and then if ever IRCC comes and they do an audit of you and what happened with your business, and they find out that you did this can happen when you're applying for PR or for citizenship in the future, and they say, hey, the government says, hey, we're noticing that people are like stopping their business right after they become PR. And then it could spark an audit inquiry from the government, which then they could say you misrepresented on your PR application because you didn't actually intend to run the business. So even if your business, so I guess my advice still is that even if you get PR and it's not working out quite as you planned and you're a permanent resident, it's pivot as opposed to completely shut it down and go get a job, because it could in the future make you vulnerable to misrepresentation allegations, which that gets you banned from Canada. They take you your PR away even if you're a permanent resident, and then you get banned for 5 years. So be careful with that.
I agree with you. And within our program, the very first program that we provided through our SUV program, is that we give sessions around pivoting. And one of the first advice that we have for our mentors, because we assign a dedicated mentor for every startup, for every business, the first mission of the mentor is to prepare with you the plan B, the pivoting plan. You have to have it. Even if you didn't implement it, at least you have to justify to the government when they come back to you asking, you didn't do that. Okay, I have this plan and I'm working on it, and this is going to be. So you have to have it. So this is part of our program. And thank you, Jade, for all the insights that you've given around this. So the other one is what. Okay. What if I need to be in Canada as my project is ready, but I need to negotiate with B2B partners? Can I get business visa at least to set up my business? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a question I get a lot. Some of you might already have a visitor visa for Canada. So you have to be careful, because business visitors versus people that need a work permit, there's a very fine line between what constitutes work versus not work. And so as a business visitor, you can come, you can do site visits, you can have some meetings, but you can't be here actively doing business. And so you have to be very careful. I've seen where people were refused work permits or PR because the government said that they actively engaged in work without a work authorization, so with a work permit. So just be careful. I find people try to get a business visitor visa quickly because they want to be here. And you can do that, but I find often they're refused. And then also just be careful about the work that you're doing, because if the business is generating revenue and there's nobody else here working other than you, it could result in, again, an allegation of work without authorization. So you can do it, but just be very careful about the work that you're doing whilst you're here.
Thank you, Jane. The other good question is, as per the guidelines, attendees are supposed to incorporate once they land in Canada. So how would they implement and validate unless they have launched the business in Canada? So I'm wondering, is there anything
Yeah,
says
well,
that
most of you, not all, but most of you have a business that exists like online, like it's virtual, like it's a tech startup. So most of you will be working, some people, they try to tell me that they can't work on their business because they're not here in Canada. But then I go back to them and I say, are you going to actually be meeting with everybody in person in Canada, or can you actually do virtual meetings like this? So as far as that argument, I mean, there are some things, especially like if I have clients who are actually, they have a ag tech business where they're installing some sort of, machinery in a farm. Sure, they can make the argument that maybe to actually come and like show the technology to the businesses, maybe they actually need to be here. But if you are providing digital support and it's something that's completely online that a business is going to use, it's hard to say that you have to physically be here. You can say you had some limitations, but to say you weren't able to work on your business at all because you weren't here, I don't think that the government will accept that.
this is an interesting question, and I have been asked this question multiple times. So, are the required settlement funds for the SUV separate from the settlement funds for the work permit, or
No.
does the funds required for the work permit include the SUV amount?
Yeah, it includes it. So if you need 25,000 for the PR application and 50,000 for the work permit, like you can just show a bank account with 50,000. You don't have to show 75,000 because they'll consider it for the PR application and then also for the work permit application.
The other question is, what is the backlog of SUV cases, and when should one expect for any news from IRCC if the PR based of SUV is filed in April 2024? Oh, you still have lots of time to wait,
Sure.
but
Yeah, so you'll, on average, to hear back from IRCC, it's about 1 year from when we file for PR or more. Backlog, I don't have exact numbers, but I can tell you it's going to be getting smaller because there's a cap now. So I think that they're working through the legacy files and through the backlog. Previously, it was a paper-based application, so that's why a lot of my really old files took an extra long time because they had to, I don't know, deal with the paper files. Then it went online a couple of years ago, so that sped things up. And now we have the caps on the program. So, and if you apply through North Forge, you're going to get priority processing. So overall, people want the application to be processed quickly, but you also have to be careful because you need some time to be able to actually put together the business and have progress on your business. So it's one of those things that you don't want them asking for an update too quickly, because if you haven't had time to do anything and then they're asking for what have you done on the Canadian entity. So it's one of those things, it's a balance, right? Because you want to be able to apply and then have a little bit of time to work on your project. Some people are great and they, we're applying for PR and they've already got these clients and like they, have secured contracts, and others, they need a little bit more time to move things along. So just something to keep in mind as well.
interesting. So the other question is, so do we form our team or you can help us make an SUV team? So again, the same question. And I love to answer all these specific questions because all the problems comes from this.
Yeah. So form your own team, find the superstars to move your business forward. And again, as Nermeen said, you're going to be married to them. So make sure you trust them as well to be on your team, because if they drop out, that's going to affect your application. If they don't respond, if they aren't actively working on the business, it's going to hinder you as well. So choose your team very carefully and do it by yourself.
The other question is,
Oh,
does
and
the
sorry,
office?
my last point on that too. You
Yeah.
don't have to have a team. I've had a lot of solo entrepreneurs come. I mean, it's a bit of a more of a monumental task, because then you're going to have to hire out usually, because it costs more money to work on the business. But I have had a few successful solo entrepreneurs come under startup visa, and this was 5 years ago, and they still have, really successful businesses here in Canada today. So something to think about as well.
I agree with you, and I would also to emphasize of what already Jade said. In our applications, we have accepted solopreneurs, we have two team members, we have three team members, four team members, five team members. So it does not matter of that. All what is my and I was discussing with Jade yesterday from the cases that we have after the faster processing application of the faster processing, we have seen it very obvious. And from all these accepted ones, I'm just going to tell you it is the strong background and how much the relation between the business and the background of the applicant. And just again to say, the first person who get his AOR for the PR is a solopreneur. Just to let you know. So it does not matter how many. It just like me matter of how robust is the business and how honest are you in presenting yourself. And by the way, that applicant does not have $250,000 Jade in his bank account, but he was honest.
Yeah.
He represented himself. I can write a story about him. He was really honest about everything that he presented, and he was the first one to get it, just to let everyone know. So the other question is, does the officer consider the time spent by all applicants within Canada on a closed work permit, or is the company's progress more important for BR approval?
Yeah, so it's the latter. So it's the company's progress. I've had clients who were here in Canada, and they had work permits, and they honestly, they weren't doing much on the business. The government, they did their applications themselves, but they had their work permits extensions refused for lack of progress. I don't know what happened to their PR application, but I don't think it's going to go well. Where I've had clients who are outside of Canada, they didn't come on a work permit, and they were approved for PR because they were, working with universities here remotely, like they were setting things up, had meetings, they were moving things forward. I have clients who they have signed contracts already for their app that they've developed with Canadian businesses. So it's not about necessarily where you are physically. The work permit can really help. I find that people pick the work permit because maybe they have young kids, they want to get in school earlier in Canada. For a 6-year-old coming at 6 versus 9 years old makes a big difference in their English retention and language and integration. Others, they just want to, there's some restrictions, like I know, Iran, for example, and China can have restrictions on certain internet access. And so they say, I just need to be in Canada because I can't work from here properly. So it's one of those things that it really depends on the applicant and how much you think you can get done. And then also remember that the startup visa work permit is still a closed work permit, meaning you can only work for the business while you're here. So keep in mind your budgeting, because if it's going to be just you living off your savings, maybe your spouse will work a little bit if you have one, make sure that you're going to be able to survive off of whatever savings you have, because it could be 2 to 3 years where you're here on a closed work permit and only able to work for the business. So keep in mind that you want to be able to budget and be able to afford life in Canada before you're able to generate more money.
So, Jade, I want to respect your time. So, our time now out for this session. I have lots of questions, and I have even in my, private chat, lots of questions, and
Okay.
there's multiple requests that they want to talk to you live. So it's all about you. If you want to continue answer questions, or do you want to quit? We respect your time, or we go like 10 minutes in the
Okay,
networking
let's go
because
10
some
minutes
people
more.
want to talk.
10 minutes more, and then we'll call it quits for today. Okay.
So 10 minutes on the networking, right? They want to talk to you.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. Of course. Go ahead.
Okay, so I would like to thank everyone and Jade specifically for attending this session. Now we're gonna close the recording for this one. All the questions I have them, I will make sure to get answers for all the left questions. Now we're gonna go 10 minutes for the networking so that you're gonna go to Jade's table to talk to her, and I'm gonna be in another table, North Forge, if you want to ask specific questions around our program. And then I'm going to send you the presentation. I'm going to send you the recording and a few more information that was mentioned in here. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jade. Always nice talking to you and working with you. And thanks, everyone. So let's go back to